Good afternoon, evening, and good morning to everyone out there to this very, very spontaneous live stream together with me, Petter, and Ben, my colleague sitting over here.
Hey.
To those of you joining, we are doing this live stream because of the shutdown of Heathrow Airport in London, the UK. I woke up this morning at around 7 and I was immediately contacted by media from Sweden and from other parts of the world asking what I thought about this failure. I hadn't heard nothing about it. Apparently it happened very early in the morning, UK time. And it is, of course, coming with some very, very severe effects to not only the air traffic around the UK, but all over the globe. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this live stream today. So we're going to be giving you the pilot's point of view as to what happens when you're up in the air flying towards an airport and it suddenly closes, and what kind of ripple effects would we see all over the world. But before we do that, Ben, how are you?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Yeah, great. Good to be here. It was very spontaneous, as Petter said. I'm actually on standby at the moment, so my phone could go at any point to go flying, or maybe in the sim. Hopefully, it will stay quiet. But yeah, we thought, we woke up this morning to this news and thinking, we have a lot of questions about this ourselves. Petra and I got chatting and thought it'd be great to have a chat with you guys and just give you our perspective of what we would do or how this is being managed behind the scenes.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about this first, and then we are going to take some of your questions as well towards the end of this live stream. So stay around for it. And we're bantering about a little bit now because we want as many people as possible to be able to join, since we basically told people about this only about an hour ago. Yeah. That's how spontaneous this is. But like we said, if Ben has to go, well, then I will continue this live stream without Ben, and we will just be waving at him on flight radar 24 as he disappears up in the skies over Europe.
Not to Heathrow, that's for sure.
Not to Heathrow, that's for sure. So, if we start this off with, let's put ourselves into the cockpit, Ben. You and I are both 737 type-rated captains, and we are instructors and examiners as well. Let's say that you and I would be sitting in a cockpit and we would be flying from somewhere down in Spain, where I'm sitting, up towards Heathrow, and all of a sudden we would get a message from air traffic control that Heathrow is now closed. Like, what would go through your mind when you hear that?
Yeah, first thing is, oh no, this is going to be a long day. I'm sure both of us, we've both been in that scenario for different reasons, whether it's weather, whether it's security threats, whatever it might be. And I think it really depends on how close we are to the airport itself. I mean, if I relate it back to, the last time something similar like this happened to me personally was actually back in 2005 during the 7-7 attack in London, if you remember that. And we were coming back, we're over German airspace, heading back to London Stansted, and we got a call over the radio from Rhine Radar, who just said to all stations, London Control Centre is now closed. All traffic to reduce back to their minimum speed, and we'll update you once we know more. And obviously you comply with that requirement. We started slowing down, but then we start talking, contingencies. What's plan B, plan C, fuel. These are the kind of things that start going through my mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because when we are flying towards a destination normally, we would have alternate airports that during our flight planning phase, we've checked that the weather is good, we've checked that we have fuel to reach those alternates, but we don't really plan for en route diversions. When we have them, especially on very long routes, but and also then we check the weather, obviously. But we don't mentally sit and think as we're on our way towards the destination that, okay, what if London airspace closes? That's something that would come as a little bit of a surprise. But like you said, that it's a little bit less critical then, because you have so much fuel. If you're in the middle of the flight, you already have the fuel available to reach your destination, and then your alternate fuel, which means that you now have a vast, especially in Europe, a vast number of potential airports that you could divert to. But that's not really the case if you're, let's say, on your way from New York over to London and you're sitting somewhere over the Atlantic.
Yeah, then it gets complicated, doesn't it? Because that's when we start bringing up topics such as either point of no return or point of equal time, where the crews that are flying across the Atlantic will plan for this on every single occasion for a variety of reasons, whether it's medical emergencies, weather, or closures at destination. They get to a point where they need to be across the Atlantic and go, okay, at which point do we keep going here and go to an alternate near the airport, or which point do we turn around and go back?
Yeah.
Or maybe divert somewhere en route, and that's where the point of equal time or point of no return. And you'll often get a chart that we will have. And as you can see on the screen, oh, hello. And imagine we were flying kind of left to right, west to east. This is an actual chart going from New York to London. And you can see those lines with the little triangles on the top and the bottom. And these are marked as point of equal time, point of no return. So if the crew were flying towards that first line where it says LPLA or CYYT, once you get to that line, before that line, if you had a problem, say they got a notification, London's closed, you're not taking any arrivals, before that line, the crew would go back to Goose Bay because it would make more operational sense to do that. But once they passed that line, and they got the news, they wouldn't go back. They would then go on to the en route alternate of LPLA or Las Palmas, and then carry on. And once you kind of get to the next line, you've got either Las Palmas behind you, or you'd carry on to Echo India November, which is the code for Shannon in Ireland. So the crew are planning this as they go along the route itself.
Yeah. So that's, it's a really important point to get across here, guys, that we are planning for contingencies, and on long haul flights, especially over oceans or over deserts and things like that, there's also contingency options. So we will sit and we will look at where we are along the route, and then we will decide what to do based on that. Now, the fact that in this case, for example, they had Goose Bay going back doesn't mean that they must go back to Goose Bay. They could also be operationally going back to New York, if that's what the company says and they have fuel to do so. In this case, though, they probably wouldn't, because that's probably why they put Goose Bay up there. Yeah. But it is like, this is how you would start to talk and start to think. What do we do? What kind of fuel do we have? Start talking together with your first officer or whoever it might be to make a plan, because initially air traffic control, they don't want you really to start saturating the frequency with just asking questions. So we would try to get as much information as we can, PIOC, as I always talk about. What's the problem? What kind of information can we have? What options do we have? Select, execute, and then evaluate. So that's what we would do. And only when we have a plan ready. So when we have taken the weather, for example, through an 80s broadcast or a Volmet broadcast, we know that we have a suitable alternate en route. Maybe I would, try to get to a base for my company, or at least a destination for my company, so I know that I have handling help and things like that. And only once we have made that plan, we would then communicate it to our traffic control. Say, listen, request a diversion towards this airport now.
Yeah, and I think along the routing, as Petter said, we've got time. We plan for it. We've got time. We've got fuel. We just execute the plan based on the weather and information we've got. But the challenge really comes, doesn't it, when you're getting closer now? You're getting closer to Heathrow, and ironically, in the UK, the weather's been nice the last few days. So
and that's a bad thing today.
It's the only time I think I've ever said that, but in this case, it was a bad thing, because normally if there was bad weather, we'd have uplift extra fuel so we can start reaching more suitable airports as an alternate. But if I looked at the weather for today, flying into London, I'm like, it's a nice day. We have our reserve fuel, our standard reserve fuel, of course, but I wouldn't necessarily have taken any extra. So now we have problems, because it's not just you looking to divert, it's every single airplane that's coming into the UK, into London Heathrow, that now need to find an airport, and they're looking from the closest one outwards.
And that is a real problem, because obviously as people are starting to divert, as aircraft are starting to divert, the workload on air traffic control goes up a lot, the workload on the pilots goes up a lot, and you still need the same separation in between aircraft. And on top of that, which is something that people tend to forget, is that there's limited parking space available on airport. So it's, even if you could reach an airport and go in and land there, if you can't park, unless they do what they did around 9/11, where they parked on taxiways and stuff everywhere, just started filling up runways, they will, like the airport will start to deny diversions. So they will say, London Luton is now closed. It's now full. London Stansted is now full. Gatwick is now full. And like Ben was saying, if you're coming in and you have your minimum reserves fuels, or sorry, not your minimum reserve, but your legal reserve with you, that will take you towards the alternate that you plan. But that doesn't mean that you have fuel to go maybe down to Paris or to Amsterdam or up to Prestwick or Glasgow in northern in Scotland. So it becomes much trickier the closer you get to the airport when these things happen.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to say something about when we declare minimum fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to point out how our alternate fuel is actually constructed, because every time we go flying, every flight we do, we have a flight plan, and it will give us a calculated fuel figure based on the aircraft weight, the weather, winds, and so on. And then it will add on extra fuel. So it will add on enough fuel ultimately to fly the approach, and obviously from that point to go around and then to route along the standard routing to our designated flight plan alternate. There'll be enough fuel to do that. There's also enough fuel to hold for 30 minutes, generally at 1,500 feet. We call that our final reserve fuel. That's the last bit of fuel in the tank that we never really want to touch. If we're touching that, it's a really bad day. And so what that means is, and what a lot of new pilots, when we're training them, may not understand, is that when you're talking about how much fuel do we have to hold when we're planning our arrival, they'll go, oh, maybe 10, 15 minutes. But when you actually look at it, you don't. You have enough fuel to literally go around and start routing towards your alternate, because if you don't and you start holding first, you're now eating into that fuel that you would need to get to your alternate, which now means you need to go dip into that last final reserve fuel to enable you to land there. So we want to take a bit more than that ideally, but that's the scenario a lot of crews would have faced today. Now, from that minimum fuel point of view that Petter just spoke about, that's an actual call that we would make, and it's internationally recognized call that alerts air traffic to the fact that we are now in a fuel critical state. And what it means is we are now in a position where we are committed to a particular airport. Maybe that's an alternate, or maybe it's your destination. And any change to the clearance that they've been given may result in them landing with less than that last final reserve fuel, that last 30 minutes of fuel. You're not necessarily going to get priority at that point, but what it will do is alert air traffic and maybe enable them to prioritize flights. But if you realize you're going to dip into that final reserve fuel, then we get the last line of defense is Mayday.
Yeah.
And what does that do for us, Petter? What does that open up?
You see, that Mayday is kind of a magic word in aviation. If you call Mayday, it opens up everything. And when I say everything, it means military airport, for example. And also, in this case, Heathrow, which I think is something that's worth remembering here, that a lot of people have been asking, so what about backup generators? How come that a fire in a transistor station away from the airport can shut down one of the biggest airports in the world? And the fact is that air traffic control worked, the instrument landing systems, the navigates that guides in towards the airport, the runway lights, approach lights, all of that worked because that's fed off the emergency generators, right? And this means that maybe there wasn't any power inside of the terminals, which meant that people wouldn't have been able to go through security, wouldn't have been able to see anything in the terminals. Nothing would have worked, which is why they closed the airport down. But in an emergency, you would still been able to get in and land there. They would have opened up and they would have allowed an emergency aircraft to come in and land. So that means that in essence, everyone would have worked to try to get away because this is what they wanted. They didn't want anyone down on the ground there. But in case it would have been the last resort and someone is calling up and saying, I'm going into those last 30 minutes now, Mayday, 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 fuel, they would have opened up the runways to let them land. What they would have done with the passengers is a different question, but it would have, that's how it would have worked. So from a safety perspective, that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And that last line of defense, that Mayday call is there so that we're never going to have airplanes just dropping out of the sky because they've run out of fuel. And everything's on the table now, closed runways, anything that you need, you get on the ground. And I know a lot of people, myself included initially, were like, well, how come the backup system didn't kick in? Surely they shouldn't have everything in the same place. But the reality is the backup system did work. They've got on-site generators, diesel generators that powered exactly what Petter said, everything it should have done, the bare necessities to enable aircraft to land safely while this was happening. If aircraft were on approach, so you still got air traffic control and everything else, but they can't have generators to power whole terminals. So the backup system did its job. There just wasn't enough power to run everything, which they could never have.
And this is like, this brings us down to the next kind of interesting thing to talk about. And that is, we see all, like if you go out to CNN, BBC, anywhere, this is the headline news all over the world.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is that this is going to affect 145,000 passengers. It's going to take days and days to clear up, even though I don't know if we know that yet, but I think that they might get the airport up and running by midnight tonight, or that's what they're planning for anyway. So like, maybe you want to expand a little bit on why we have these ripple effects happening when something like this happens.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, because just because it suddenly comes back online, say it came online now, it doesn't go, all right, we're back to normal, because now everybody is where they shouldn't be. You've got all the crew and all the aircraft coming in to Heathrow. So all the Virgin aircraft, BA, American, that should have been in Heathrow now, ready for their turnaround out to wherever they're going, are now in other airports. They're in other parts of the world. Crew are in other parts of the world. And that takes a huge amount of time and effort and resources to now relocate those aircraft and back into where they need to be to make sure crew are rested, ready for their next duty, because there's very prescribed flight time limitations that crew have to adhere to. So, I mean, I know a lot of you probably know Captain Chris. He's out in Delhi at the moment. He was saying that you cannot get a hotel in Delhi. You wouldn't think that a fire in London can cause problems in Delhi, but all the flights, all the people that should have been going off to London now aren't, and they need somewhere to stay. So, and this is happening globally. So this is a huge logistical nightmare to try and get.
I mean, there was a miniature version of this when Southwest had problems over Christmas 2 years ago, and they it was a big storm, one of their hubs, and they started kind of dislocating all of their crews and aircraft out of the United States. And it took literally, I think, 3 or 4 days before they could resume normal operation again, because they had to fly empty aircraft back to bases and to organize the crews and stuff. So this is like when the system, when the machine works, it works beautifully. It's like a dance, and you can see it on Flight Radar 24 and those kind of sites, how these flights, they just interconnect and they fly. And I mean, a place like Heathrow is the base of, I think, or is at least a destination of, I think, 90 different airlines.
Right, wouldn't surprise me.
From all over the world.
Yeah.
So when a place like this gets taken off and it's no longer available, and these 90 airlines are starting to relocate their aircraft, not only in the local area, but also to places like Paris, Amsterdam, and so on, the ripple effects, it's so complicated and painful to get it back online, because it's so sensitive, the system.
Everything depends on something else, doesn't it? And if something else isn't in place, everything else beyond it just falls apart. And I mean, just from my own experience, I'm sure you, Petter, as well, when we've been flying in storms and so on. And I mean, the most recent one for me, I think, was Storm Eunice in the UK. And it was slightly easier in some respect. I mean, operationally, from an operational perspective, it was easier for the airlines because they knew the storm was coming. They could have contingency plans in place. This, not so much, because it's completely unforecast. But I remember flying into Stansted at night. The forecast was horrendous, as was pretty much everywhere in the UK. And as a crew, we're looking for somewhere we can hang out at, somewhere we can go. If all else fails, we can definitely get into this place. And it's, for that example, I had Bordeaux. Bordeaux's a long way from London, but it was somewhere. We had Nantes on the way, which is in northern France. That was possible. So the idea was to go into Heathrow, to Stansted, hold for a period of time, try a couple of approaches. If that didn't work, head south. If Nantes was better, we try there. If not, we go to Bordeaux. But everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's looking for the same airports.
I had a similar situation when there was a huge area of low fog that was covering both the UK and Paris, actually, and the whole that part of Europe, basically. I remember, I think I was flying from Girona up to Stansted, London Stansted, and I think I had something stupid. I think I had like Berlin as an alternate, something crazy. And I remember calling the ops controller saying, "Listen, I need the alternate to be Berlin here." And they like,
what?
They say what? And I said, "Listen, I'm not going to fly there. right?
No.
That's not going to happen. But I need to have fuel on board in order to enable it to have a legal alternate, right? In reality, once you're airborne, you're going to be operational. So you're just going to be going to whatever airport is open and has acceptable weather at the time. But as you said, that's weather, right? So that's something that you can plan for. If you see that bad weather is coming, everyone is carrying this extra fuel. And the worst thing that happens then is that potentially these aircraft, they divert and then they fly empty back.
Yeah.
That you'll see that sometimes, that they fly empty back to where they were supposed to go to pick up the passengers, right? That might sound cruel to the people, you know, that it doesn't really make sense sometimes that an aircraft would fly empty to do that, but it does for the reason that we just said, in order to just logistically have the aircraft and the crews where they're supposed to be. And that's going to be the major business here. Now, as an after, like what will happen after this, I think that there's going to be a lot of investigations into how a single transformer station could have this effect on what is now, I think, the world's 4th busiest airport. It's 1,300 movements per day or something crazy like that. And we're gonna have to look into that. I mean, like Ben said, the systems, the backup systems did work, but not for the terminals. Maybe Heathrow needs to be fed from two different directions, 2 different areas. I don't know, but something that is crucial, infrastructural crucial like Heathrow, shouldn't really be kicked out by a single fire like this.
No, and aviation is built on redundancy, isn't it? Everything that we do, we have a backup for and a what if, don't we? And it's just, even though the backup worked from a safety perspective, there's certainly obviously room for improvement there from an operational perspective. And as you said, having all your eggs in one basket is probably not wise. And I can imagine now airports around the world looking at this and going, do we need to have a backup here and then the alternate here so that they're both not affected at the same time? Because, you know, yeah, it's rare, but it highlights a weakness that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I remember, how many years ago was it when they sighted drones around Gatwick, and Gatwick closed down for like 3 days before Christmas? Yeah. I mean, that was also another one of those like crazy. And for crews, it's obviously it's also pain, because we get displaced and then we get delayed and we end up in hotels. And
I remember going into, when we're coming into in another storm, I think it was, and we had fuel to go off to somewhere else, and we were coming into London. We're kind of strapped in the jet, bumping around on the approach, and we were number 4 on arrival, if I remember correctly. And I remember number 1 at a wind shear go around. You heard him going around in the wind shear. We're like, okay, here we go. We kind of planned for it. We briefed the wind shear escape maneuver. So we're bumping it down, we're configuring, gear down, flap 15, we're running the checks. Then we hear number 2 go around, wind shear. And we're like, okay, I'm manually flying now, you know, bumping around, trying to keep it within limits.
Which is fun.
Which is lots of fun. I enjoy, and you kind of, you know, officially dread it, but actually it's fun.
But you dread it on the planning stage, but you actually, when it comes to actually wrestling the beast, you kind of enjoy it, because it is really wrestling the thing. You see it, like those of you who haven't seen it from cockpit videos and stuff, it is pretty intense.
Particularly in the 7.3. No, particularly in the 7.3, isn't it? It's very much kind of all of this. And you're trying to fly this ILS and the speed's all over the place, and you're keeping it within strict limits. We have very strict requirements in order to continue an approach. And we're keeping it in there. And I'm waiting for this 2-tone siren and the wind shear alert, ready to action the wind shear. And we're coming down and just get 50, 40, 30, 20. And I'm thinking, okay, we're okay. And just as we get to 10 and I touch down and the nose gear came down, we get a wind shear warning. And I'm like, nope, we're down. I'm not going back up again now.
No, you're down.
We're down safely. And then we taxed it off, aircraft behind me, wind shear go around. So we were lucky. And I remember going home thinking we swerved the bullet that day, because they're all going off to Berlin and Bordeaux and I'm driving home. But trying to get that back into the UK is a nightmare. The planning is a mess.
No, UK, when it comes to certain things, snow, for example. UK is and can be a nightmare. I remember also I had a similar situation where we came into Stansted and we saw the snow coming. As in we knew the snow was forecasted, and snow in like I said, in the UK, they close down airports very quickly when it starts snowing, because they just don't have the equipment to clear it. So we came in and we could see on the weather radar how that green area started coming in on the left side, and we just landed and taxied in. And I think we were the last ones after that. It started snowing and they closed it down. And I remember going home, switching on the TV and just seeing how the travel chaos started kind of like moving. And the funny thing then was that we came back the day after to fly, and it stopped snowing then. And then they had actually found some dude that obviously could clear snow. The problem was though that he hadn't thought everything through. So they had cleared the snow. So all of these aircraft was parked at the gate, like in the morning to go, and they had cleared all of the snow from the apron. The apron was beautiful. There was no snow on it. The problem was that they had plowed all of the snow up against the back of the aircraft.
Okay.
So all of there was like a meter high snow wall behind all of the aircraft, so no one could get out.
Oh,
it was the funniest thing. But you live to learn, I guess.
Yeah, they live and learn, and And you mentioned about coming back empty. That's something that we do when these disruptions. And a lot of crew will be called off standby today to potentially position out, get an aircraft.
This is why I'm so surprised that you are.
I know. I'm kind of keep checking it. I'm kind of paranoid. I'm not missing a call here, but so far it stayed quiet. But and I mean, coming back into the UK, empty is fine when the weather's good, but airplanes surprisingly don't handle very nicely when they're empty, do they? They're a bit of a pig to fly when they're empty. They don't like it.
They're not built for it. I mean, that's the thing. But I don't think people understand that. These aircraft are not built to be empty. They're built to have 200 passengers on board. And if 200 passengers are not on board, they're weird. They don't handle it.
It is weird.
Good.
It is weird. Particularly when it's really, really windy. It feels horrible. You feel like it feels horrible. You haven't got any inertia because the 7.3 is max takeoff weight 80 odd tons. Empty, it's 42 tons. Yeah, so it's you can carry another 7.3 on top of it, but effectively. But not pleasant, but not something these crews will have to worry about.
No, I wouldn't think so. Anyway, I don't know. Is there we've talked about it from a pilot perspective, a little bit from air traffic control. Neither you and I have much experience from the air traffic control point of view, except for us interacting with them. I'm going to guess that this was probably, as it happened, it was very, very intense.
Yeah.
But as the day progresses from an air traffic control point of view, it's just a new reality, and they have adapted to it by now. Yeah. So it's going to start becoming interesting again when they open up, and all of these on schedule flights are starting to come in more or less at once. Yeah. Because that's another thing. They won't be able to do that because it's been such a long stop. The flights that are diverted are so many that you can't take all of them in at once. So you're going to have slots on the aircraft that are coming into Heathrow even after this. Yeah. Which is the next thing. But this is where air traffic control shines. They know how to do this. They know how to plan to get an even flow of aircraft in. And I mean, I'm thinking there's probably a lot of people in around the New York area that is going to be waiting. I think they have 36 flights per day from JFK.
Yeah, I'm sure the hotels are rubbing their hands. You won't get a room anywhere, would you, within probably 50 miles of New York or Dubai or somewhere like that? And it's also the ongoing knock-on effect, because it's going to take a week or so, no doubt, for this to recover, because it's not only getting everybody back in, you've got to stagger the flights that should be going out that day as well. Sure. And the next day, and they're not going to go as normal until this. It wouldn't surprise me. We're looking at another best part of a week until this gets back to normal.
Yeah, and millions and hundreds of millions of euros and pounds that have gone to waste.
Yeah,
that will just disappear. I'm not sure how the EU laws are around compensating passengers in this case as well. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't know, because that's unfair on the airlines if it is down to the airline.
But this is one of the things where the airline business is unique. Like if a train would not work because one of the stations are closed or because something wrong with the tracks, I don't like they might be able to. They might have to pay the money back for the tickets and stuff. But in the airline industry, if you have more than, I think, 3 hours delay or is it 4 hours, you have to actually pay out a set sum of money to each passenger, and that sum might well be much higher than the actual ticket price was, especially if you fly with a low fare carrier. So you paid 35 euros for your ticket and you get 200 euros back because you had a 3 hour delay, and it's going to be interesting to see now if this will be subject to that.
Yeah. And the other maybe unforeseen or unknown issue that this presents for airlines is that a lot of crews position in to either operate flights or for their recurrent training. And if there's a lot of crew that was scheduled to come in to train or to redo their license, as we do every 6 months or so, they're not going to be there. So that means that if they can't get their simulator done because they can't fly in, their license expires, which now means they can't operate the flight they should have done a couple of days later. There's all of these other little operational issues that are going to come into play here.
Yeah, yeah. Now for a day, hopefully not, but it could definitely have it for some people.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
But can you think of anything else? I mean, I know that there was loads of questions. Like I said, I was contacted by Swedish radio this morning, basically when I woke up. Oh, what's going to happen in the world when this happens? And like we said, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be chaos. I feel bad for the passengers that are involved from a safety perspective, except for the first few minutes after this disclosure happened. I don't think that it would have been much to think about. No. It's just those, like, when you have that sudden congestion that you could end up with aircraft, with fuel problems, but I haven't heard of anything happening.
No.
So I don't think that happened. So from a pure safety perspective, I don't think that this was much to talk about. It's just operational.
And that shows that our system, from the flight crew perspective, works, doesn't it? We've got that resiliency to manage these scenarios and land safely. I've not heard of any Maydays, diversions, anything like that. So it shows the crew out there. I'm sure they've earned their money today, but they've done a good job.
That's the thing, and it's also something that I wanted to point at a little bit more, actually, because this, like, when we call Mayday fuel, it often becomes blown up in newspapers and media as a huge thing. But Mayday fuel, what that really means is that you're down to your last 30 minutes, which is not great at all, and it should be. But calling Mayday is the right thing to do. Like, we have a legal obligation to call Mayday when we see that we're going to start using those last 30 minutes of fuel. And what it does is really just help air traffic control reorganize, so that we know that these guys have this problem now. They are going to come down and land first. And that's it. It's not like we are now down to our last few drops.
No. It sounds dramatic, and it will no doubt make the headlines, but it's part of a process that's pre-planned out.
Yeah.
There's a fuel escalation process, so that we are ideally never touching that last 30 minutes. But if we have to, it's there for a reason. But we need to make sure we get on the ground as quickly as we can, and that's what the Mayday is for.
Exactly.
But hopefully the escalation process up to that point will have prevented that from happening.
Yeah, now, because that's the thing as well. We sit there, and if there's one thing we have good check on, it's fuel. Right?
Always.
You sit, especially when you start seeing any type of problems. The first thing you do is you look at fuel. Yeah. Because fuel is time. So you start calculating time. And the time, you give yourselves an extra. So if the minimum diversion fuel is let's say it's 2.4 tons. I would normally put 2.6 ton in, or something like that. A couple of 100 kilos extra, so that I'll get the warning, like using reserve fuel, before I actually do, so that I have maybe 5 minutes then to really make the decision.
Yeah.
So so this is what we do, and we add on top of that. Okay, so we need to go up to 2.6 tons. It looks like we're going to land with 3.2 tons. We have 800 kilos. That's about 16 to 20 minutes of holding fuel. Cool. What are we going to do with that? How is our alternate? Like, this is how we operate. So at like a fuel emergency, it's normally triggered by either extremely bad, unforecasted weather that comes, like fog that shouldn't be there, and all of a sudden it covers a huge area.
Yeah.
Right. Or storms. Southern Europe, typically huge storms that come from nowhere and park themselves over a couple of airports. Right. But fuel emergencies, for different reasons than that, is very rare.
It is super rare. And from a training perspective, I know from training cadets and so on for years, it's getting that mindset change from fuel into from a quantity into a time. Thinking exactly as you said, fuel is simply time. And it's just, there's no point saying, oh yeah, we've got an extra 2 tons of fuel. Well, great, but what does that mean for us? And that's how we think about it. And that's what crews would have been doing today very regularly.
Yeah. Now, if you see I'm looking down, it's because I'm starting to look at the different questions here. I see people in the chat, and I see a lot of generous donations in the super chat as well. Thank you very much for that. It really helps. As you can see, I've managed to hire Ben because of that. No, but what I would like to do now is I would like to take some questions, actually. So we've got Navin working in the back room here. He's going to be choosing some questions, and we are just going to react to them. So if you have questions about this, let's see what the first one is. This one is from Chris Price. So,
hey, Chris.
When it comes to something like this, would it be wise for the flight crew to actually think counterintuitively? Look to land at the furthest airport, for example. What do you think?
Yeah, potentially it kind of goes back to what we're saying. As long as you have the fuel for it, potentially that works, because one of the attractions for me in that case I had in Storm Eunice was that Bordeaux is a long way away, and I'm thinking everyone's looking for an alternate. This is this is maybe not where everybody else is looking, because the last thing I want to do is divert to Bordeaux, take an hour to get there, and then it's full up. So there is that side of it. There is that benefit, counterintuitive, you said, Chris. It depends very much on the scenario. I mean, you said with Berlin, wasn't it? It was a similar story for you.
Yeah, no, well, exactly. I just took that because I needed it for legal reasons. But I would think the same. Maybe I wouldn't go the furthest airport.
Well, no.
But I would, like, if I was coming into Stansted, for example, and I knew that the weather was marginal there, I would definitely start preparing for Birmingham rather than going to Luton or to East Midlands, for example. But I would still, like, I would prepare for that, and I would know that I could do it, and I would calculate my fuel for that. But I would still, before I divert, I would still have checked the weather for Luton and for East Midlands and see, can they accept me?
Yeah.
And if they say yeah, then off you go.
Yeah. And it's something I've learned from experience is Luton fills up incredibly quickly, as does East Mids. I think 6 aircraft or so. So as soon as I can, I get my name on the list. Go, right, can we have Birmingham or can I have Manchester? So I'm on the list, because I've learned if you hesitate, everyone else is going to do it before you, and you're left up the creek. So
yeah. And by the way, never ever divert into Heathrow unless you absolutely have to, because Heathrow, getting slots, I mean, you can get in to Heathrow, especially if it's because of fuel issues, but getting out can take weeks. Like, literally, you're not going to get your aircrafts away from the airport for weeks.
No.
So I don't think I remember we didn't even used to have Heathrow as an available alternate.
No, for that reason. I mean, you can imagine if we did have to dive in there, the whole of the operational department of the airline just doing that head slap, going, "Oh no!"
Yeah, you can hear 30 of them like. Yeah. So that was a great question.
Yeah.
Let's see what the next one is.
What else have we got? Okay. With Mayday fuel, the rule is all runways are available. Would that potentially include Heathrow, even if it doesn't have the power? I think, Paddy, it's a good question. I think you've covered that ultimately, haven't you? Yeah. So it would be.
Yes, absolutely. And so like we mentioned, in this case, the emergency generators were working, which means that the ILSs, the tower, the approach lights, runway lights, taxi lights, all of that was working. So yes, absolutely, Heathrow would have been available for it. Now, if you have joined this live stream late, we've made it so that you can, I mean, you'll be able to rewatch this from the beginning. So we've kind of covered the entire story arc of what could potentially happen here. So I highly recommend you to rewatch this from the beginning if you missed the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. What else have we got? Any other good questions in there?
But Navin has popped up. Also, Navin, if you see super chats that have come in, you can highlight those as well.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. In the meantime, let's have a look. Do
you think Navin fell asleep?
No, Navin wouldn't fall asleep. Definitely not. Let's have a look. So what else have we got in here? Mayday fuel sounds like some random. No, that's not correct.
I mean, but while you're looking for it there, I just want to, because I saw a few comments in the beginning about clickbaitiness of the thumbnail, and I didn't really understand that one, because the reason that this happened was because of a big fire, and I mean, we're talking a big fire in one of those transformation stations. I think it was 25,000 liters of cooling oil that has been burning, and it's been burning nonstop, which is why there's a fire on the thumbnail. So I do apologize if you thought it was clickbaity. It was not our intention, but YouTube is what YouTube is. So we will try to make the thumbnail as interesting as possible. And
yeah, absolutely. Oh, Barry. Hi, Barry.
So will they extend operating hours globally to clear the backlog? That is a good one.
Because Heathrow's got very strict curfews, doesn't it, at night time? Very strict curfews. So that may be bendable.
I could definitely see them doing that. I could see them going in with some kind of emergency decree saying that now we have this huge international backlog, so we're going to be taking landings throughout the night, for example. I have nothing to back that up on.
No,
I have no information about them doing that, but I could see them be like, with them, I mean, like the governments in this case, going to have to take that decision, and to be more lenient in cases like this. But it depends. It really depends on how severe the disruption is.
It wouldn't surprise me in the short term, even if it's just for a few days so they can get aircraft back in overnight to start the schedule up again. It wouldn't surprise me. In fact, it would make sense, in my view, to get that just to take that initial hit and just get the operation back online as quickly as they can.
Oh, for sure. Especially if things like noise curfews, for example.
Yeah,
like, you can live with noise for 2 nights.
Yeah. Well, they've had no noise now for a day, so maybe you could.
Exactly.
We can factor that out.
That's a great question. I love taking these questions, by the way.
Yeah, it's cool.
I saw a super chat here saying, "Hey, Amudo," which is my favorite hockey team, and they are playing. I think they're playing right now. They're in the qualifier. They're about to be kicked out of the highest league unless they make this qualifier. So I'm slowly dying inside. But hockey is big in Northern Europe, especially in Sweden.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Cool.
What else we got? Hi. So, would this be more like the 2010 Iceland volcano eruption in terms of suddenness and air closure instead of major weather? Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, well.
I mean, that was exceptional.
That was like Heathrow in every country in Europe, wasn't it? That was happening to everything.
Yeah, and in some ways that can be better because then no one is moving, so there's no displacement really. It's just kind of frozen in position and can be restarted again. Now, obviously, they did close the airspace there as well, so you had diversions as they closed the airspace. Yeah. So it was bad. But I remember, I mean, that was crazy. We've lived through some crazy stuff, haven't we?
Haven't we? I know. It was bonkers.
I won the lottery and was not flying on that day, so I was home. But I had a colleague on my base whose wife was 9 months pregnant and was due, and he got stuck in Malaga, I think, and we were in Stockholm, other side of Europe, and so he flew down. And then they closed the airspace. Like, okay, volcanic ash, undetermined. We don't know if this is going to take a day, a week, a month, a year. We don't know, right? So he just he rented a car and drove home. He drove home. It took him like 3 days, but he had to drive. Like, it is craziness.
I know. I remember, and there was a Royal Navy ship that went down because quite a few crew got stranded down in the Canary Islands, and there was no way out. And the Royal Navy, the UK Navy, put some ships down there to get the UK Brits back to Britain. And I know there were some crews that hung around to get on the ship, and they sailed back on like a Royal Navy frigate. I mean, that's pretty unprecedented.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
cool.
This is where, how sometimes to say like the only time, the time where you get to show what type of a captain you are is when things go bad, right? Because on a daily basis, as a captain, you do your job. It's very similar to what a first officer does, and everyone in the crew knows what to do, and it just kind of runs along like a self-playing piano. But when things go wrong, like in these kind of situations, that's where you are going to need to show command capability and take initiatives and listen to your crew and make sure that everyone feels included and give information to your passengers. And it's the same with countries, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's when things like this happens that whoever is running the country really gets to show what they're made out of.
Yeah. And you need a leader, don't you? As a captain or in a country, somebody, you can't just be hiding behind the flight deck door or behind number 10 door. You need to be out there and giving information, because I think people get angry when you don't know.
That's the thing. I mean, one of the first things that I learned as a captain was that even no information, as long as it's verbalized, is information.
Yeah.
So when I had because we had this like, when France's air traffic controllers decide when the weather starts being good in the spring and they decide to go on strike, then we have these huge slots, or at least we used to have these huge slot times. It could be like 5-hour slot times. Yeah. And I remember sitting, because what happens then is that you tend to board the passengers anyway, because you put a ready message in, and sometimes there is a slot opening up in the airspace because they don't close down the whole airspace. And you can get out, right? So you don't want to get that slot and then all of a sudden have to board the passengers and miss a slot. So we would board the passengers, put a ready message in, and then the wait would start. And I remember then that you sit there, and about every 15 minutes, I would go out and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the flight deck, just to inform you that we are still in contact with the air traffic controllers. We're trying to get you out as quickly as we can. But at the moment, the slot that we have, which is in 3 hours from now, still stands. But believe me and my crew are doing everything we can to try to get you out of here as quickly as possible. And that would keep people happy.
Yeah. People appreciate that. And it's something that when we're training command upgrade, which is when we have a senior first officer who's now going through the process of becoming a captain, and it's quite a big process, but it's one of the things when they get to line training, which is when they're out of the sim and actually in the aircraft itself, learning with me or Petter, for example. One of the things I drum into them is that the importance of keeping everybody informed, because things fall apart. And that's where you can nip problems in the bud. Things like disruptive passengers, people get angry, and then you have bigger problems now. You've got people getting angry on board, police getting involved, offloads, and the root cause can often be just simply because there was no communication, and that's national as well.
You can see it like an aircraft cabin is like a microcosm of every type of available personality that you can think of on every flight. If you have 200 people, you're going to have 150 very different type of people on board, right? And what happens if you don't take on the leader role? Because as a captain, you have to show leadership, and you show leadership by communicating. But if you abdicate that, and you sit behind the closed cockpit door, and you're sipping coffee and just waiting, and you don't say anything, what's going to happen is that there's going to be tribes starting to build up in the cabin, right? You're going to have the ones like, why, what are you not telling us? And they are going to get people following them, and they're going to start rising up. And I'm not joking here. Like, this would happen within within an hour, unless they hear something.
Yeah.
So I have loads of strategies for that. Like I remember, for example, I always talk to the cabin crew and have the front door open and the air stairs up. Air stairs out. And the reason for that is that when you see an opening in the front of the aircraft, you don't feel trapped.
Yeah.
And you're not in go mode anymore.
No.
As soon as the door closes, you're in go mode. Like, why are we not moving? But as long as the door is open, they know we're not moving, because obviously the door is open and there's a way out.
Yeah.
So only that, relaxes the temperature in the cabin, and people can go out and they can get some fresh air and they can go back to their seat. There's the amount of tricks that we have up our sleeves in order to keep people relatively happy. What's your how long have you kept passengers on board?
No longer. I mean, the longest I think I've ever had them on board was just over 2 hours before the decision was made to offload, because there was no hope of this slot coming forward. So, and it's 2 hours is a long time. That's a flight from London down to Spain, pretty much, isn't it? Just sitting there. And I think the keys to keeping people happy, as you said, is communication. And door open is an amazing one, because people are claustrophobic, people are nervous, and keeping the temperature cool. It's very easy for us in the flight deck. We've got windows open, we're arms sitting out there, sipping a coffee. It's great. But when you're in the middle of the cabin, it gets stuffy, and there's humidity. It's horrible. And that builds on that kind of, I'm trapped and I get anxious, and just getting fresh air and get the APU on, or conditioned air, and just keep it cool. That's to me is vital for it.
I've been in situations in Spain, where you get temperatures up to 35 degrees and stuff. When I've operated aircraft without APU.
Me too.
And I've had those kind of delays, and it doesn't matter how much you have doors open and stuff. You don't get, the temperature goes up, and the humidity goes up as well. So I've had to ask for permission to have one engine running. To actually provide air traffic control by running an engine. They're like, loading more fuel, run one engine, tell the ground crew to stay well clear, but at least you have an AC unit.
Perfect.
You have to think a little bit outside the box. And I see, Navin, did you have any more interesting questions here, or should we start wrapping it up?
Keith. Hi Keith, is there a process on the part of the airport or ATC for prioritizing among airlines for the restart? Good question. I would imagine it's probably done on time of delay, like when should they have gone, I would imagine. So if they should have gone this morning, they might be first out later on. I don't know. What do you think?
That's a great question. I would think that they need to think operationally about this, but what operational part that they would prioritize is hard to say. Because it makes a difference. Like, for example, would they let all of the long haul guys go before the short haul guys? Would that make a difference? But like long haul, to solve the knot on long haul would have a more global impact. And it could be quicker to fix short to medium haul, maybe.
True. The only other implication of just going from the other side is that short haul is often a feeder for the long haul. So you might have the flight going, but you might have a good load of people that couldn't make it if the short haul wasn't going first. It's a tricky one. I mean, whether it's first come, first serve based on time since delay, or whether it's strategic, I'd be an interesting one to find out. It's a good question.
We should get an air traffic controller from London in here.
Yeah,
We have
we
to
should
sort
reach
that
out.
out next time.
Yeah, anyone
Because
knows?
that is really interesting. I have a feeling that it probably is less. There's less 3D chess going on than we think. I think
Yeah,
you're probably right that he called the startup, so it's his turn next.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
But
yeah. It'd be interesting to find out.
normally that's how it works when we put ourselves in the queue, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, it is.
Whoever asks for pushback is the one that's going to go, depending on if everyone is equal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what have we been going? What, 50 minutes? Time flies, doesn't it, Pedro, when you're having fun here?
I mean, that's the thing with this. You guys that are watching this, we are actually thinking, me and Ben, because obviously we help each other out now on Mentour now. Ben has been kind enough to start helping me out to present some of the videos. And by the way, the reason we're doing that is because we are increasing the amount of videos and material that we produce. This is a good example of that. We want to become more reactive. So when stuff happens, and we think that we can add information to you that might be valuable, we want to be able to do that. But I can't do Mentour Pilot, Mentour Now, live streams and everything myself. So I needed help. And Ben has more hours than me, is just as experienced, has the same background. It's literally like a better looking version of me. So having him on board is a huge help. And one of the things that we are thinking about doing potentially is a podcast together, a video podcast that's going to not come out on Mentour Now. It's going to come out on a separate channel, most likely. We haven't decided yet. But we want to be able to do these kind of things. But we sit down maybe on a weekly basis and talk about, okay, so what happened? What do you think about this? What's the implications? And apply. And this is not going to be just aviation, by the way. It's going to be a little bit more about leadership and about like general. What happens in this case? How would you act? How would you reason if you found yourself in a situation like this? And that's something I love having these kind of chats with you. I forget that there are people watching.
Yeah, me too. It's awesome. And a massive shout out to all of the Mentor family, because the positivity and very kind comments, very, very grateful. It's awesome to be here. And looking forward to doing more.
He's learning.
I am learning.
He'll get better.
Yeah, I'm a kind of cadet when it comes to this. So I'm kind of learning but awesome to meet so many of you. And the positivity has blown me away.
That's the thing with when I started Mentour Pilot, that's what I was saying. It's about positivity and constructive. Like you need to be positive and constructive. Those are the main things. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do and what we're trying to implement on everything that we do. But anyway, let's see. Should we take one last question? And
one more.
Yeah,
let's do one more.
So, Chris, I've just seen that Heathrow will be sending out some international departures as of 1900 hours and accept some diverts from Gatwick. Will these be using the same crews that were scheduled to fly them?
Good question.
It depends on when they were diverted. There is, generally speaking, we have around, if you're doing two sectors, you have around 13 hours-ish. If you're flying normal daytime flights, it depends on a couple of things, but you have about 13 hours of duty time that you can use, flight duty time. And you can actually, under certain circumstances, extend that if you get access to a hotel and rest to do split duty, which means you can extend a little bit. So there is a possibility that some of the same crews could operate. But if they came this morning and it's now 1900, then no.
So it might be a case that crews have to position out to get aircraft, which again is a challenge in itself because they might not be able to fly out from Heathrow. But if it was a flight that was due in at 11, because it happened at 11 o'clock last night, didn't it? So I don't think anybody, they probably would have been rested. They would have been put in hotels when they diverted to wherever they went to, probably put in a hotel. They're probably well rested now. So I would imagine they're starting to think about how can they get them in. But basically from a rest perspective, we have what's called a minimum rest requirement. And it's normally 12 hours minimum rest, or however long your previous duty was, if it was a bit longer. So that's generally what the crews will be having to have.
But that could be shortened down in these kind of circumstances to 10 or something.
Yes, if you're out of base, there's a few other little caveats there. But it will be the operations department are going to be working hard.
There will be a lot of pilots flipping through the flight time limitation chapter in the FCOM in the manuals to see it. Anyway, with that, I would like to just say that if you guys like this kind of discussions, by the way, like I said, we are thinking about doing a podcast that you hopefully will love. But we have created this this virtual 737 course that you might have seen. We did some live streams around it. There's a QR code up here if you're interested in it, where me and Ben sit and we have these discussions about how to fly the Boeing 737, right? How it's being set up, why we do things a certain way, how it's done. And it was intended for people who have their own flight simulators at home and wants to do it a bit more professionally and the way that things are done in real life. But it's also equally interesting for people who are just interested in how things work.
Yeah.
Like how what do pilots do and why do they do it? Yeah. Why does it sound like that?
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, you should definitely go and check it out. Yeah. And I think we've instituted a discount. Just
we do,
today, right?
Yeah, just for this, discount. So we've got about £30 off just for this particular live stream. So if anyone wants to come across and learn more about how we fly the airplane and learn all the little tips and tricks, then now's a good time to get it.
Absolutely, go and check it out. In any case, I've loved doing this. If anything happens that's major, let me know either through Discord. We have a fantastic Discord community, or send a message over obviously YouTube. We are both on Instagram.
Yeah.
Ben under Airline Pilot Performance, me under Mentour Pilot, as expected, and we will try to pick it up. So when anything happens, we might do another live stream of these.
Yeah.
This was very spontaneous.
It was. My phone has stayed quiet, which is surprising.
Awesome. But without further ado, thank you very much for watching. Like I said, if you missed the beginning, you can go back and re-watch it. And I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Awesome. Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have a great night, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Ciao.